Hello friends and welcome to Marsh Studio. I'm William Seiji Marsh. This is the third part of a multi-video series on triads, their inversions, and how to voice lead between them. In the first two videos, we introduced the close position major, minor, and diminished triads and their inversions in all of their shapes. We introduced the concept of the chord scale and established that there are three ways to move from any one chord in a key to another in the same key. We covered 4 exercises for moving between chords by the interval of a second. In this video, we'll discuss how we can voice lead chords smoothly in one key when the root is moving by a third. At the end, I'll demonstrate an exercise for practicing voice leading triads diatonically by the interval of a third. First, let's talk about what a diatonic cycle of thirds looks like in a given key and how we can voice lead smoothly through that progression. Okay, so I've got the G major chord scale laid out here in seconds. This should be familiar from lesson 2. I think it would have been triads exercise 4.1, where we practiced ascending and descending the G major chord scale in seconds. So here it is, and then up above the chord symbols there you see some Roman numerals, and in case you're not familiar with this notation, this is the way that you would analyze a harmonic progression in Western standard music theory practice. You've got uppercase Roman numerals like the 1 and the 4 and the 5. The uppercase denotes major and lowercase denotes minor, like in the 2, the 3, and the 6. And then the 7 is diminished. There's a little circle there to denote that it's diminished, and it's also lowercase because that's just standard practice. I'm assuming because the third is minor in that chord. So what we've got is that G major chord scale in seconds, and what we want to do now is we want to arrange this out in thirds. And what that means is we're going to start with the G, and we're going to go up to the B, and the B up to D, the D up to the F sharp. So notice each one of these is an interval of a third, so we have 1, 2, 3, right? And 1, 2, 3 to D, and so on. So arranging these out in that way, I'd start with G, B minor, D, F sharp diminished. Now once I get up to F sharp diminished, let's imagine that we have a G here and an A minor. This is a continuum, right? So this can continue kind of in either direction. And so we're thinking we're going to put the G and the A minor from the beginning and put them up at the end here to continue this. So from F sharp, we would go up to A minor. That would be our next one. Then from A minor, we go up to C. From C, we go up a third to E minor. And then if we go up a third from E minor, we end up back home at G. So here we go. So this is our chord scale in thirds. So up here, this is G major in seconds. This is G major in thirds here. And if I was going to write the Roman numerals out, I'd have 1 as G would be my 1, B minor is my 3, lowercase because it's minor, D is my 5, F sharp diminished is my 7, A minor is my 2, C is my 4, E minor is my 6, and then I end up back at 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at these chords here that we've come up with in this order and look at the closest way of voice leading each of these. So let's start with the G major triad in root position. So there's our G, and now we start from G, the next chord is B minor, right? So it would make sense, we just shift it up a third, right? So we've got our B minor triad there in root position. And it just looks like everything just shifts up a third. Nice and neat and tidy. And of course that makes sense to us guitar players, because what that means is we take our G major shape and we move it up 4 frets and we turn it into a minor shape by lowering the third, and bam, there's your minor chord, there's your B minor. Now this is a very guitaristic way of thinking, but if you asked a pianist, they would take a look at these two chords and go, well, wait a second, G to B minor, I've got right here, actually let's do this, I'm going to change colors. So I've got between G and B, I've got a the D stays put here. The D is the fifth of the G chord, and then it's the third of the flat third of the B minor chord. And then I also have this B, which is the third of my G chord and the root of my B minor chord. And then what I have that moves is this G goes up to the top there and becomes an F sharp. But so that G is moving up a seventh to become that F sharp. This might be something you recall from the last videos I did where I talk about seconds and sevenths effectively being inversions of themselves, right? So what if like we took this F sharp and we moved it down an octave to here? And then we just, let's see here if I can erase this. And we'll just erase this guy. There we go. So now all of a sudden we have this G moving downward to this F sharp here. So we end up with G here in root position, and then we move to this B minor in, excuse me, in second inversion. You have these top voices staying put, and then you have the root of this G minor chord moving down a half step in this case, but a step in the scale down to become the fifth of this new chord. And as you go through different chords, so for example, the next chord in our sequence would be D, right? So let's go here to a D chord. And what we might find is that we've got two notes that stay put. Like for example, there's definitely a D in my D chord, right? And then there's also, I know that the third is an F sharp, so we could keep this F sharp there. But the last note in the D major chord is an A. And I go, okay, well, there's my A there. And so again, I have the same thing. I have the D staying put. I've got the F sharp staying put. And then I've got my B moving down a whole step to become the fifth, the root of this chord. So I had the root of this chord moves into the fifth of this chord, right? And then now in this next change, I have the root of this chord moving down to become the fifth of this chord. And so this is the pattern that you're going to see throughout this entire exercise. So as long as you're moving in thirds, you're going to have two voices that stay put, that remain the same, and one voice that moves. Okay, so let's take a look at Triad Inversions exercise 5.3. Here I have, oh, by the way, if you want to look at this same page, it's included in the supplemental files located in the link at the bottom of this video in the description. This is an excerpt from exercise 5.3. As you see here at the top left, I'm starting at bar 15. So if you want to take a look at the unadulterated copy of it, it's in that packet there that's available for download. So these red lines here denote that the notes are not moving. They're staying put between the two chords as the chord changes, and the blue line shows that the note is moving. So what you might notice is in all of these, there's two notes that are remaining put, and then one note that's moving, and that's going to be the same for both lines. The difference between the top line is this is ascending here in the top system, and the bottom system is descending, and which is kind of tricky because as you can see, the chords are actually descending in pitch in this first one. They kind of have this general downward direction, and then in the bottom one they have this general upward direction. When I say ascending and descending, I'm talking about the root movement in thirds. So G to B minor is moving up a third, right? And then B minor to D is going up a third, and so on. Let me clear some of this out of here. Clean this up a little bit. Oh, I can't go any further. Let's just do this. So, erase this. Cool. So what you'll notice is that no matter what the chord is, if you're moving in thirds, no matter what the chords are, if you're ascending here, like in the top system, your root is going to turn into your fifth. So for example, the root, the G down here at the bottom, is moving to become the F sharp, which is the fifth of this B minor chord. And this is going to be the same from B minor to D. So in B minor, what's your root? It's the B, which is the middle note here. And then that's going to move downward to A, which is the fifth of your D chord. Actually, I'll use a highlighter. So this note is moving down here. So the G is moving down to become the F sharp, which is the fifth of B minor. And from here, the B is going to move down a step to become the A, which is the fifth of your D chord, and so on. So no matter what, if you're ascending in thirds, meaning the root movement is ascending in thirds, then your third and your fifth of the chord are going to stay put, but the root is going to move downward. Let's take a look at the bottom system here. So we're looking down here in this descending part. So now the root movement is descending. So for example, you have G to E minor, which is moving down a minor third. You have E minor down to C, which is moving downward a major third, and so on. So you've got the root movement moving downward, but you can clearly see, again, run out of undos. Here we go. So as you can clearly see, the pitches are moving generally upward. But the same kind of thing. We've got, in the first chord, we have D, G, and B, but this time, instead of the root moving, we have this D down at the bottom that's moving. And so you would think, okay, well, what is D in relation to G? It is the fifth, and it's moving up to become an E. And what is E in relation to E minor? It is the root. So in this case, we have the fifth that is moving to become the root of the next chord, which makes sense, right? Because you've got the root turning into the fifth if you're moving in one direction, and if you move in the opposite direction, you've got the fifth turning into the root. So now we're going to take this and map it out on the fretboard and see if we can start wrapping our heads around what that looks like. Now let's take a look at how this works on the guitar. Let's keep looking at that same excerpt from Triad Inversions exercise 5.3, bar 15. Grab the first G major triad in root position on strings 2, 3, and 4. From low to high, it's at frets 5, 4, and 3. We'll be moving through the chords in the key of G major in ascending thirds, which means that the root of the chord will move down one step in the scale to become the fifth of our next chord. Because we know this is a root position shape, we know that the lowest voice in this chord is the root. By moving this root down one step in the G major scale, in this case a half step, down to F sharp, we now have a B minor triad in second inversion. Your fingers should be at frets 4, 4, and 3. Let's identify the root of this shape. From low to high, we have an F sharp, a B, and a D. So our root is the middle voice of this triad. Let's move that down a step in the scale, this time a whole step, down to A. Depending on your fingering, you may have to refinger the remaining notes, but just be careful that you replace them at the correct frets. Now you have a D major triad in first inversion at frets 4, 2, and 3 from low to high. I want to pause and point out a couple patterns in the exercise so far. So we've already covered that when the root movement is ascending in thirds, the root lowers to become the fifth of the next chord. On the first chord, we started with the G in root position, the root was the lowest voice. And in the second chord, the B minor in second inversion, the root was the middle voice. Looking at the current chord, the D major in first inversion, we'll find that the root is at the top voice. There's your D. Every time the root moves in ascending thirds and we voice lead in this way, the position of the root in the chord changes to the next string. Of course, when you are doing this exercise in reverse order, all these patterns also reverse, but keeping them in mind can be one way of knowing whether or not you're staying in the exercise. From the D major in first inversion, we move the root in the top voice down a whole step to become the flatted fifth of our F sharp diminished triad in root position. The root, or F sharp, in the bass of this voice moves down a whole step to become the fifth in our A minor triad in second inversion. The root of our A minor triad is the middle voice of this triad. By moving it down to our open G, we now have a C major triad in first inversion. And then moving the C in the top voice of this shape down a half step to an open B gives us an E minor triad in root position. Lower the E root of this chord a whole step to the open D to create the second inversion G triad. Now we've moved through all 7 chords of the G major scale in ascending thirds. The next task is to go in the opposite order, descending thirds, or ascending sixths. I'm going to leave you to spend some time on your own to figure that out. As I mentioned in previous videos, the expansion of your abilities on the instrument is generated by you engaging with the information and incorporating it into your practice. I invite you to start with the last chord we ended on and work your way back up to the first chord we started on. Before I finish this video with a demonstration of exercises 5.1 through 5.4, I want to share with you some suggestions for getting the most out of this exercise. In your first pass, I would recommend playing through each exercise slowly with the page to get the general scope of the exercise. Pay attention to the order of the chords, where in each voicing the root is located, where in the sequence you find the F sharp diminished chord, and other patterns. As you put these exercises into daily practice, make it a goal to get off the written page completely. Think of the written exercise as a map, which helps you see how to get where you're going. After you've been there enough times, you no longer need to consult the map, right? By getting your eyes off the map, you get to actually see the landmarks along the way and fully experience the journey. Once you master this exercise in the key of G, put it into practice in the keys of C, F, and D like we did in exercises 4.1 through 4.4. Each of these exercises covers all possible inversion shapes of each chord on the given string set. That means that transposing this exercise to a different key will effectively have you playing through the same progression, but offset by however many frets. One hint for how to do this would be to start by moving the first chord of each string set in a given key up 12 frets and use that as your starting point. This will give you enough fretboard to cover the progression 3 times, going through each of the possible inversions of each chord. For example, if you're going to transpose this exercise to the key of C, move the first chord of Triad Inversions exercise 4.2 up 12 frets. So move this second inversion C voicing from frets 3, 3, and 2 up to frets 15, 15, and 14. Use this as your starting point. When you move to the next string set, move the lowest chord on the strings 3, 4, and 5 from frets 3, 2, and 0, and move them up 12 frets to frets 15, 14, and 12. The remainder of this video will be a demonstration of Triad Inversions exercises 5.1 through 5.4. You can find the PDFs in the video description below labeled Supplemental Materials. Thanks for watching, and please leave a comment or reach out with a message if you found this information helpful or if you have any questions. Be sure to subscribe so you can stay apprised of the next video in the series, where we'll talk about voice leading in fourths and some strategies for incorporating this into some real musical situations. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you later. Triad Inversions exercise 5.1, strings 4, 5, and 6. The metronome is set to 60 beats per minute. 1, 2, ready, go. Triad Inversions exercise 5.2, strings 3, 4, and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Triad Inversions exercise 5.3, strings 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Triad Inversions exercise 5.4, strings 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, 3, 4.